record on this computer. And there. We're going to start. Classic. All righty. Oh, and one more thing. After the Kahoot, please don't leave quite yet. We're going to take attendance at the end. So just a heads up on that.
Don't want to forget about your extra credit.
So I'm just going to get started. There we go.
Last night. There's 23 participants this time. What do you mean, like talk romantically?
John Bestie, your mic was on. Alrighty, so this one was a bit of a tricky, but it is bottom-up processing, which is also can be known as sensation. So bottom-up processing is when information processing that begins with the sensory receptors that works up to the brain. So in this example, Maggie is listening to the notes firsthand. She doesn't recognize the tune, so therefore listening to the music is her way of receiving like that sensation of hearing the notes. But if Maggie was to recognize the song, then that would have been top-down processing, which is when information processing is guided by higher level mental processes. So we can construct perceptions drawing on our experience and prior knowledge. Does that make sense? So yeah, bottom-up processing is pretty much sensation, and top-down is also perception. So good job, y'all. Alrighty, so this is just something you kind of would just have to know. There's no way to really remember it, but the cerebellum purpose in the brain is muscle control, which includes balance and movement. So the kinesthesia is our movement sense. So that pretty much is the sensing the position and movement of our individual body parts. And then the vestibular sense is our balance. So that enables us to sense our balance. So that's why they would be part of the cerebellum brain structure. Alrighty, so this theory can be a little tricky, so just stay with me while I try my best to explain it. So opponent process theory is the theory that opposing retinal processes enable color vision. So red to green, blue to yellow, and white to black. So staring at the British flag, when it's green, yellow, and black, will tire our neuron responses to those colors. So when we look at something white, the after image will be like blue, red, and white. So the original British flag colors. The oh my God, I'm sorry. The textbook does a really good job explaining it. There's like a diagram too called the after image effect on page 196 in the textbook. And so parallel processing is when you're able to process multiple stimuli at once. I think I can't remember what chapter it was, but we had a question where it's like you see something big, red, loud, moving on the street, you'll be able to just process all at once. That is a fire truck. Feature detectors are nerve cells in the brain visual cortex that responds to specific features of a stimulus. So those are like lines, shapes, angles, and movement to be able to identify that stimulus. And then transduction is just the conversion of one form of energy into another.
Also, if anyone did the review packet, there's an example of this flag and this example in the Kahoot in the packet if you wanted like more of a visual connection between the two.
Alrighty. So yeah, bats have excellent night vision, so that means they have more rods than cones in their retinas. So cones pretty much are they function in the daylight and they can detect fine details and colors. So humans, we technically would have a lot more than rods, since rods also just detect black, white, and gray and are sensitive to movements. So that allow like animals like bats and cats to have excellent night, oh my God, eyesight for the nighttime. And then foeva are just the central focal point in the retina where the clones just cluster. So that was just a little trick to add. But yeah, any questions so far? Alrighty, good job, y'all. So yeah, this is sensory adaptation, which is the diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimulation to something. So wearing the bracelet, obviously throughout the day, she's just not going to pay attention to it as their sensitivity would just diminish to it. The other, so perceptual adaptation is ability to adjust, change oh my God, ability to adjust to change sensory input for vision. So that wouldn't exactly be the correct adaptation, but sensory adaptation would be the correct answer in this situation.
No way.
Yeah, so we do not have to be consciously aware when we are being primed. So priming can occur even when we do not have time to consciously perceive the stimuli. So there was a great example in your textbook, I believe in the beginning of the chapter, that talked about an experiment where participants were primed to a face either with a pleasant or unpleasant stimuli. And the faces that were primed with the pleasant stimuli had a higher like rating compared to the faces primed with an unpleasant stimuli. So you do not need to be aware to be primed. So this was a little trick question, but the Weber's law is two stimuli must differ by constant minimum percentage, not amount. The book made it pretty clear. So for example, two objects must differ in weight by 2% for the average human to be able to tell the difference. So make sure you're just reading more carefully. But y'all are doing great. Alrighty, so these three properties are all part of the grouping principle. So grouping is a perceptual tendency to organize stimuli into a coherent groups of meaningful forms. So proximity is when groups nearby figures together. Continuity is when we can perceive possible, for example, like two lines as one instead of like discontinuous shapes. And then closure, we are able to fill in gaps to create a complete object. There's a really good figure that describes all this. It's figure 2.63 in your textbook. Figure ground was a popular response, but that is the organization of the visual field into objects, which would be the figure, and then that stand out to the ground. So for example, it would be in your book it mentioned like a lead singer would be the figure while the backup members would be the ground. So and then all right. So yeah, sensory neural hearing loss is a very common hearing loss, but it also can be known as nerve deafness. So those two are kind of like interchangeable. But that hearing loss is caused by damage to the cochlea receptor cells or auditory nerve. So being constantly around the toxic noise, which is like the concert, the screaming fans, that kind of stuff for like a very prolonged time, can cause the Coachella hairs to flatten to cope with the sound, which cause damage to the receptor cells from being able to bounce back. They explain that much better in the textbook, which is page 209. So I would highly recommend checking that out if you need a bit more of a description. And then conduction hearing loss is just damage to the mechanical system that conducts sound waves to the Coachella, never pronounce that. So that's like the middle and inner ear being damaged. So. Right. So it is receptor cells, and that's just something you will need to know. As I said before, the phoeba is the cluster point of a lot of cones. And then optic nerves are just the information highway from the eye to the brain. But other than that, Y'all are doing amazing.
Okay, yeah, this one is sensory interaction. So, looking at this example, when you have the food's aroma and the taste, those two senses are interacting with each other. That's just the easy way that I like to think about it. There will be more examples of the other three, but like Maddie said earlier, the kinesthesia is kind of the sense of movement in the body, and yeah, there'll be examples of the others. Good job. Yeah, it is all of the above. All of these were explained pretty well in your textbook. I think it's like about halfway through the chapter, but I could be wrong on that. But yes, it's all three of these. Okay, so this is true. This is pretty much the exact definition for nociceptors. So they are those sensory receptors if you touch a hot plate or a hot pan from the stove, or you have pressure from like a needle touching your hand. That's what's going to pick those things up in the skin. So that's just something that you're going to have to memorize, but the book has a lot of examples in that. Yeah, this one is amplitude. So the amplitude is just the height of the sound wave. The frequency is the number of the complete wavelengths that pass through a certain point in a given amount of time. The pitch is just the highness or the lowness of the sound wave. And the threshold was just something to throw you off. Okay, so this is false. It's actually called the cochlea. The eardrum is the first spot where sound hits your ear. So, the eardrum is not in the inner ear, but the cochlea is. So, yeah, that's just something you'll have to know, but I don't think you'll have to know the exact placement of where it is, but just kind of know the steps to how sound goes through your ear. Good job. Yeah, that one is just judging distances. I kind of like to think of when you're sitting in your car and you look in your rearview mirror and your depth perception is kind of off because of the way that the mirror makes things look closer than they might actually be. Yeah, so it's just judging distances and how far things are from you or close. Yep, that one is perceptual constancy. So that just means that you're perceiving an object as unchanging no matter the situation that it's in. So no matter the brightness of the room, the size, but all of the other aspects of the object are the same. And so you can still recognize it in like a different lighting scenario. Shape constancy, none of you picked that, but it's just when you perceive the form of a familiar object as constant. And then binocular cues are the depth cues that depends on the use of your two eyes. Yeah. Yeah, good job. You guys are paying attention. We mentioned that a few times, but just to make sure you know, yes, it is true. Yeah, that is vestibular sense. So that's just like Maddie said earlier, that's just how our body senses balance. So if you're on a roller coaster and you're sitting in a seat suspended from the roller coaster, your feet aren't touching the ground, so your body's really confused about your balance. So then you get off of the roller coaster and you feel all dizzy and kind of like almost like a motion sickness. But then after a few minutes, your body goes back to normal because your feet are grounded and your vestibular sense kicks in. Yeah, this one is none of the above. So if anyone forgot, an ESP is an extrasensory perception. So that's kind of like the controversial claim that perception can occur apart from sensory input. And all of these examples, they don't have scientific evidence to support them. So this is also in your textbook if you need to go back and review that.
All right, Slay, you guys did great.
Nobody leave yet because I have to send you your attendance sheet to make sure you get credit. Let's see. Okay, one of our other TAs added a fun question in here. You don't have to answer it. It is not mandatory. Just put your name in it, and we'll make sure you get credit for being here. If you have any questions about any of the Kahoot questions or any of the questions on the review packet, feel free to stay after and ask or ask now. Maddie and I have office hours tomorrow at 12 in Miller 1108. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
1180.
Oh, yes, 1180. They are usually Kahoot, but if you would like a different format, you're welcome to suggest one. Like we could just do a regular PowerPoint if you want. But yeah, this is just kind of a good way for everyone to get involved, and I don't know, friendly competition is always good.
Yeah. Also, who doesn't love Kahoot?
Yeah.
So I'm screen recording this right now, so this will be posted on YouTube, which we will post that link into the discussion board. So just be on the lookout for that. You should be able to see past links from past review sessions, just so if you need to review a certain chapter, it's always there. So yeah.
And could someone just clarify that the link is working? I mean, I'm sure it is because I haven't heard, but
Okay, thanks.
perfect. Thanks. Thank y'all for coming. This was a good turnout. I know you got your extra credit, but
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys have some questions, or are you just waiting till no one's here to ask? I do that sometimes too. I try to wait until I'm the last person to ask.
Mhm.
A little suspicious.
We could probably stop recording.
Yeah. All right.